Hello, I'm Dave Feinlieb, and this is Beyond the Shelf. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. You can join our mailing list and learn more about how we're helping PepsiCo, Instacart, and other leading brands and retailers build content at scale at itsrapid.ai. My guest on today's show is Randy Mercer, Chief Product Officer at 1WorldSync. Randy is an omni-channel product content expert with over 15 years of industry experience. He leads 1WorldSync's global product management and solution architecture teams, aligning the company's portfolio with current customer needs and emerging market trends. In particular, over the last 3 years, Randy has led the expansion of capabilities in existing products, the ideation of new functionality, and the identification of complementary acquisitions. Please enjoy my conversation with Randy Mercer. Randy, great to see you again.
Hey, Dave. Happy to be here, and always good to see you as well.
First off, congrats on your promotion earlier this year to Chief Product Officer at 1WorldSync.
Oh, thanks. It's been fun and interesting just guiding some of the advancements that we've made to our platform. So excited about it.
Now, I want to spend some time talking to you about your current role and what you're working on, of course. But before we do that, you've got an incredibly good story, a fascinating one about how you got started in this space. Would you take a few minutes here and share that with our listeners?
Sure. And I think you're talking about my beginnings as a developer going back 20 years.
I hear you were an engineer before this chief product officer role.
Yeah. Back in the day, I wrote code. That's what I went to school for. And so, yeah, I wrote code, and I worked for a software development company. And my customer base, we were a consulting company, so my customer base was primarily manufacturers, CPG manufacturers, and we helped with ERP integrations and those kinds of things. And I got a call from one of my customers that they had been requested by a major retailer to start putting their product content into this new thing that they didn't really know what it was. Back in the day, it was called UCCnet, and it was intended to be a mechanism by which brands would share content with retailers, and it was just net new, and they didn't know how to do it. And so they asked me if I'd take that on as a project and just figure that out. What is this thing? How do you put data in it? And so I wrote a little tool for them to take data out of their ERP system and put it in this thing. And no sooner did I write that than I got a call from another customer that said, "Hey, I got this letter that said I got to do this thing." And so we very quickly identified that as a recurring problem that we could build a solution for, and we did. And that thing ultimately became what's known as the Global Data Synchronization Network, and that's really the space that I'm in today. And that thing that we built, we now own the IP for that, and we sell that as a solution here 20 years later. So I kind of just kind of fell into the space that I'm in now.
Amazing. So a couple lines of code, well, probably more than a couple, but turned into a tool, which turned into a whole standard and a big company.
Yeah. It was incidentally, it was a low code tool that I was writing in, so it was not too much more than a couple lines of code.
Entrepreneurs, I think, often want to know, how did you find the customer and what put you on to the fact that it wasn't just a one-off? You mentioned other folks were calling, but they're probably calling about a bunch of things. What's the insight there where you go, yeah, I've got something here?
Yeah, this one, relatively easy, I would say, because the ask came from a retailer that we all know. It's one of the biggest on the planet today, and so you see that, and you see it coupled with the persona of the manufacturer that they've asked to do something, and connect the dots pretty quickly that this is not the last time I'm going to see this particular problem.
So you've been in the space, you've seen it grow over time, now getting content live, building content, distributing it. What are some of your takeaways or your learnings from these different roles that you've had over the years?
Oh yeah, just go into it with your eyes open, right? And just an example of that is, going back to that first instance where I've got to put some data in this thing, and back then it was, you know, 30, 40, 50 pieces of information, about my product, height, width, depth, and that kind of stuff. And over the years, that's grown to literal hundreds, in some cases, thousands of pieces of information, right? And so thinking harder about it, maybe right out of the gate, I maybe would have done a couple of things differently in terms of just readying the application that you're building for where you see this thing going, and maybe try to just look a little bit, be more forward thinking about it. I think is probably the big learning there.
Now, your current role, you're working on a lot of different things, I imagine. What are some of your key focus areas that you're thinking about?
For us, when I first took over, leadership in product, we had a little bit different focus because we were really trying to buckle down on our platform and just strengthen it in a few ways, just organically. So doing a lot of engineering internally, trying to improve it from a couple different vantage points. We then sort of shifted our focus into acquisition of technology, right? Grow a little bit faster by going out and finding some things that we needed, acquiring that, and then bolting it into the platform. So pretty quickly, shifted in terms of, what are the new features that I want to build, and how do we build those, to how do we find them and bolt them in. So a little bit different. And that's really been my focus, as of recently, with the exception, I think, of AI. And I think that's, you hear about that every day. And I think, that's something that we're really spending a lot of time thinking about, how can we use that to better our business and help our customers and so forth. So, acquisition, bolting in some technology, and AI are the two big things on my plate these days.
So, not busy at all.
No, no, I'm almost out of things to do.
I love it. Let's take those one at a time. So, acquisitions, you're out there, you talk to something, some companies, it's interesting. What's involved with that? Are you, looking at the tech and how it slots into the roadmap, or opportunistic? And, what goes on there for those who haven't maybe been through the process?
Yeah, it turned out to be, a little bit of all of those things. We've done 9 acquisitions in 2.5 years. So some of that was based on just a very specific roadmap in terms of advancements that we wanted to make in our platform, and we knew what the technology gaps were in that. So, really just started looking for what are the companies that do that today, and you work through that list, and who may or may not be actionable, and those kinds of things. A couple of them, I'd say, were a little bit more opportunistic, right? They just opportunities that come along that you maybe didn't, envision that on your roadmap, but then when you see it and you recognize that actually is really relevant to our business, and so you take advantage of that. So I'd say, a couple of our acquisitions fell into that as well. But when we're looking at those that just definitely were on the roadmap, safe to say that we cross paths with well over 100 organizations, and so you look at a lot more than you actually end up doing something with. But we look at them from a few angles. Number one, does it just fill that gap that we know we have? And if so, how well does it do that? Is there brand recognition to it? Those kinds of things. And then very quickly, then you have to get down into technology. Is it built with sticks and rocks, or is it actual legitimate technology? And then the last thing that we kind of learned more and more as we went through acquisitions was just really looking at the culture of the organization that you're bringing on board, right? Because you got to work with these people, and you got to integrate that solution into a broader solution set. And so we just looked at it from that perspective to, just make sure we were just bringing on team members that we were going to be confident in, and, get some really good skill sets out of it, and so forth.
And you're both in front of the customer together too, which I think you really got to have that alignment. Otherwise, it's hard to go to market with it. So yeah,
100%.
that's great. So acquisitions, keeping busy there, obviously, and then AI. There's so many areas. We've all heard of Chat GPT, of course, but what are some of the things you're looking at there, and how might they, or how are they impacting the business today, or where might they be impacting it, 12, 24 months out?
Yeah, you mentioned Chat GPT, and again, you're the AI master, so you're further out in front of the stuff than I am. But just
Let me insert my infomercial here.
yeah, no, I mean, seriously, I mean, you're doing some really interesting things with generative AI, and Chat GPT just being an example of that.
Yeah.
When we look at it, there's the aspect of it that you hear Chat GPT so much, or those generative AI platforms, and those are the things that everybody can recognize, like, oh, this is how I would use that. This is how this might impact what I'm doing today. So you want to be there. You want to be using those things and finding creative ways to help your customers. But for us, where we're thinking harder about it is behind the scenes. Some of the back office stuff that we do for our customers in terms of they're coming to us with content that they've already created, in some case using platforms like yours, and ultimately, often that needs reconciled into a complete a package of content that can then be distributed around the planet to service a lot of use cases, ranging from item setup to to more e-com oriented use cases. And for us, the item setup has always been our strength and our core competency. And when you look at things that are happening today in terms of warehouse automation just being one of those things that is sort of a natural response to the e-com, and how do you fulfill that as quickly as possible and automate it as much as possible. If the data is not absolutely correct when you try to do those things, everything falls down. It doesn't work very well. So we're looking at AI in terms of how do you interrogate data, reconcile it from a bunch of different sources, find the outliers or the anomalies in it, and hopefully correct all of those in the interest of when you send out this package of master data, it's really ready to do its job, so that when you get to the fun stuff that that you guys do, all of that just works better and it does its job better, and you have higher performance in ecom. So that's really where we're looking at it more as back office type things.
It's great. And do you have an example, maybe for our listeners, where something that you would have done a certain way in the past, I don't know, maybe with more code or rules or something like that, but now that you're able to do with AI, and just to illustrate the difference or the before and after and how you might apply it?
Yeah, one of the things that we do for our customers is, and again, just for those that don't know, our platform sits between brands or manufacturers and mostly retailers on the other side, and it serves as a point of exchange for master data that's going to be used by the retailer to set up their items internally, and then ultimately, operate their sales channels. So one of the things, the services that we offer for brands who are challenged with, I've got to have all this information that I can send to retailers to do all the good things I just talked about, is that there's brands out there that just aren't very well prepared to do that. Maybe they're smaller brands that don't have a lot of people to throw at that problem, or they just haven't invested in the content, whatever that is. So we offer a program whereby, just, Mr. Brand, send me your product. Just literally send me a case of your product, or 100 cases of your product, depending on how many products you have. And we'll do all that work for you. We'll break it all down. We'll take pictures. We'll use the data assets associated with that product and the imagery and the physical product itself to weigh and measure, get accurate weights and dims, that kind of thing. And ultimately just build this big package of content for the brand, and basically taking all that work off of his plate. If you went back a couple of years, we were doing that like largely manually, right? So humans doing all that work, looking at the packaging, pulling the data off, and so forth. That's a perfect example of where we've started applying AI to that practice, right? So you start with images, you start feeding images and data assets into GPT, and it extracts content, and we've just continued to just lean into that and keep perfecting it to the extent that we just get more and more of the content that we need in seconds versus minutes or hours historically. And then there's things that you can do from a QA perspective, throwing rules at that to make sure that you've automated as much of it. And then the humans that used to be doing all that hard work, you can repurpose them to just do really solid QA over that, and ultimately just come out with a better, faster product for your customer. And so, perfect example, just going from, still humans involved, but they're just doing just a higher level work, right? And using technology to do the heavy lifting behind that.
It's great. It's a great example. And I love this idea because we, at It's Rapid, we spend so much of our time looking at the content that goes on the page or the ad campaign, the videos, things like that. It's really interesting to hear about. Here's how this applies kind of behind the scenes, if you will, so we can get the right data to start with to then go build all this other other content. So it's a really interesting use case for this. Now, One World Sync, you were talking a little about that. Would love to spend a minute for those who don't know, and maybe you can give us an overview of what the company does, and how you do work with the brands and the retailers. Interesting spot there in the market, working with those different constituents.
Yeah, so just One World Sync, the history lesson on that, it goes back to that company that I talked about at the beginning, right? Where this brand said, "Hey, I've got to put my data in this thing called UCCnet." And at that time, UCCnet was a subsidiary of what we used to know as the Uniform Code Council, right? Responsible for the UPC code that you see on pretty much every product that you buy at a retail store today. And that thing that called UCCnet eventually, just through mergers and acquisitions and a few things, changed form over about 20 years to become the company that I now work for, 1WorldSync. Going all the way back to the beginning, it was intended to be this point of exchange between brands that are making products and hopefully selling them somewhere, and the retailers and e-tailers and distributors that come into play, folks that are going to move those products through the supply chain and ultimately put them in the hands of consumers. And so our platform was intended to be this global standard mechanism by which you exchange all of that product. So fast forward now 20 years, and for 15 years we very much focused on all the behind the scenes data that you need to just operationalize items and operate your channels and so forth. And over the last 5 or so years, we've just really shifted our focus into, what are the fun things that you do after that, and e-com being the obvious example. And that's where organizations like yours come into play. When you look at the brands and the retailers and distributors that we serve, different problems that you're solving for them. So it's kind of the same problem that they have. They're trying to share this data, but both of them have different nuances to, on the brand side, how do I come about all this content, right? What if I just don't have it? And so we've, over the last, 4 or 5 years, and then more specifically the last 3, where we've started acquiring technologies largely aimed at how do you help the brand just do that better, knowing that if you help the brand, the retailer ultimately is going to have a better experience, or the distributor, in getting the content that they need to do whatever it is, either supply chain oriented things or e-com. Then on the retail side, now how do you help him go a little bit further with it? So now you got all the data you need. Now what do you do with it? How do you use that to build out a product detail page in an e-com scenario that is absolutely as complete as it can be? It's accurate, has all the fun content, that's going to compel a consumer to actually buy something. Ratings and reviews is the last thing that we added to our portfolio. So how do you inject that into the conversation? And essentially just how do you help that retailer really provide a very comprehensive e-com experience that's aimed at the consumer, which is really what we're all here for today, is to help consumers buy things faster, right?
Well, we're all definitely always on our phones, I've found, and definitely looking at the reviews. You just acquired Power Reviews. Speaking of which, tell us a little about that.
Yeah, Power Reviews, their platform is aimed at, user-generated content, is the phrase you'd hear wrapped around that a lot. But again, rating and reviews, right? So a customer, when you pull up an e-com site and it says, would you like to write a review on this product? Sometimes the button you click and the form that you fill out is a Power Reviews form, right? So it's not innate to the digital experience. It's being injected there via JavaScript, and it's Power Reviews. Doing that, even on a brand's own, corporate website, sometimes they'll have that ability to write a review right there. And the idea there is that a consumer is going to be compelled by one experience or the other to write a review. And then commonly those reviews are then surfaced on retail e-com sites, right? As a way to just provide the consumer more information to make that conversion decision. Where it gets a little bit interesting is you can only rely on the consumer just deciding to write a review, just by their own motivation, a certain percentage of the time, and often you need to compel them to do that in a couple of other ways. And there's a few ways you can do that. One of them is to provide samples of products to them, right? So Power Reviews offers programs whereby they take maybe a new product that's being just introduced to the market, send out samples in exchange for writing a review, right? So it's one way you can get that review content for a product that's literally not even in the market yet, There's no other way a consumer would know about it other than that. Other mechanisms take point of sale data and use that to extrapolate which consumers bought which product and ask them, right up front, ask them to write a review as a way of generating that review activity for products that are already in the market. So all of those are just things that Power Reviews, they're experts in that today. And so just an exciting addition to our portfolio when you think of building out a product detail page. Reviews is always something that you see there today. So we're just excited to have that.
Now, I love content, obviously the front end content, the marketing content, the PDPs, the images, videos, all that stuff. We've been talking to brands and retailers and looking back, and we first met when I was at Content Analytics. There was kind of this one and done approach to building content. You would go through item setup, like you talked about, you get the item up, it goes live. Hopefully you have some content. If you don't, maybe update that. But we're done. We got the thing live. Now we found that brands really want to be engaging throughout the year. They're doing a lot more refreshes. I was curious if that's something you're seeing as well. And, if so, what are kind of some of the strategies and approaches that the brands and retailers are taking there?
Yeah, that's a great call out. And we have over the last couple of years really started thinking harder about just the concept of a sustainable program by which a brand can use to make sure that the content that ends up in the marketplace is fresh, right? It's just always up to date. And when you look at our target market or our customer base, very much centered around CPG and CPG retail. And when you look at those products, specifically food products within CPG and food service, I guess I would say is also a pretty significant customer base for us. But food products in general, when you look at those products, they change constantly, right? So the packaging is changing, right? So just seasonality, plays into that, holidays, all that kind of stuff. Regulations, right? What they have to put on the package changes constantly. What you can expose digitally about your product continues to change. Reformulation, just product improvements, it all nets out to CPG products change absolutely constantly, right? So if you take that one and done approach of where I'm going to take some pictures, I'm going to create some data, I'm going to send it out in the marketplace, and I'm going to forget about it, that stuff is usually out of date, almost immediately, right? Obsolete very, very quickly. So we think about it more today about how do we help brands orchestrate this workflow or this life cycle of content, starting with creating it. Then you got to manage it very, very effectively so that you can deliver it out in the marketplace. And then how do you use analytics to understand, am I selling stuff? Am I selling as much as I could be? Where do I have holes? And then take that back to the beginning and do it again and just keep improving.
Optimize.
Yeah. So it's just, we think about it from that. So a lot of the things that we've added to our portfolio really aimed at this concept of orchestrating this process. And we literally refer to it as product content orchestration, aimed at that concept of it. If it's not fresh data, it's probably stale and probably wrong.
Yeah.
And all kinds of things can go wrong when that happens.
Well, great insights there, even beyond seasonal. So many factors go into the product imagery and the content and like you said, the reformulation. So I think lots of good reasons for brands to be thinking about how do I keep this content fresh? One other area we've been working on lately is something called these mobile ready hero images. And we've seen a lot of interest in that because they're on the PDP. We're all on we're on our phones. Even in the store, you're looking at your mobile device to read up on it, something like that. So also wondering, what you're seeing there and any interesting approaches, how brands are thinking about this or should be thinking about mobile as sort of the common shopping experience.
Yeah, the short story there is we're just seeing that become more and more of a requirement across the retail landscape that we serve as customers. So basically it's just become a core requirement. And for me, it ties back to the consumer expectations, right? Consumers, as you mentioned, you're always on your phone and sometimes limited bandwidth, right? So the fewer things you have to scroll through to get the information you need, the better, right? And so a mobile hero image is a great way to do that, right? You get a little bit of the product image in there. You've got some key details that you're typically pulling out, maybe quieting down a few things that you don't need to bother the consumer with in that context. Is it a lazy consumer or just a super busy one? I'm not sure, but the mobile image is just one of those ways that you can service that. So then you fast forward to, man, if I've got to have that for every product in my portfolio and I've got hundreds or thousands of products, how do I mass produce that? And that's where, services like yours or platforms like yours come into play of how do you use AI to look at an image and pull out the things that I need to mass produce that thing. It's just become one of those things that you got to have it. And it's an evolution in the content that is needed to sell effectively online. And then, what are the opportunities that creates for platforms to create that stuff? So that's really where we see that going. It's not going to change. It's just going to keep getting more elaborate and sophisticated, I think, from here on out.
I know we talked a little bit about AI earlier in our conversation. If you're looking ahead and you get your crystal ball out and you say, okay, the next 12 months, but even beyond that, the next 3 to 5 years, what are some of the other areas, or is it, it's all AI and that's the focus, or is it that? What are some of the other areas you're thinking about as well?
AI is it's here to stay, right? It's gonna become an ingredient to almost every piece of our technology, right? It just adds a layer of sophistication and things that you can do that you couldn't do, 5, 10 years ago in the way that you now can. So it's going to be, part of everything that we do, but we're going to continue to lean into, some of the back office elements of the content that's needed in the marketplace. And again, I always look at, frictionless shopping, warehouse automation, those types of things that, again, it starts with the content. And if the content's not right and not complete, it's like that stuff does not work, right? Just negatively affects everything. And the good content that, platforms like yours create just it can't do its job if the foundational stuff isn't there. So for me, that's where, we'll continue to just lean into that because it's just not optional, for all parties involved. So that's really going to be it going forward for us.
I love it. Well, I'm super excited about all the ways we can work together, AI and otherwise. So so much great content and hopefully some interesting capabilities to be built as well.
100%, man. It just gets more fun every day. And every day you wake up and it's something you hadn't heard before, right? There's more stuff.
There's more. Well, let me if you would, I'd love to ask you a couple of questions outside of work here,
Sure.
some fun ones to wrap up our show with. So first off, and I know it's hard to get to two or down to two, I should say, but if you could pick two people who have inspired you the most in your professional life, who would they be?
I can't get, I won't get to two people. I'll get to two groups, two personas. One of those being my kids. I have three of them, and they're all at the point where they're, kind of starting their professional lives, and all three of them have proven to be pretty enterprising about how they're going about it, thinking for themselves and finding some really creative ways to start their careers. So for them, I look back on that and it's just, I'd like to think it's a little bit of a reflection about how I think about things, just be creative about it and work hard and good things will happen. So I continue to, just stay involved with what they're doing. And it literally is an inspiration, right? So two more, and it sounds cliche, but it'd be good old mom and dad, man. They taught me to be a good person and just work hard, and you do that, and hopefully things go the right way, and they kind of have. So I try to stick to that and just be a good partner and a good teammate, and then just lean into it really really hard. So those groups.
Those are great. And that, by the way, that has always struck me about you. We've known each other a little while now, and your authenticity and your creativity are just, I mean, they just come through so loud and clear. So those are really great. Well, one other one here, which is outside of work and family. What's your favorite hobby?
Yeah, it still bounces off family a little bit. So I spend most of my time when I'm not working at One World Sync building motorcycles, and I do that, as not as part of, but in alongside of my son. That's his business, is he builds custom motorcycles and custom supercars and stuff. So that's what I spend my time doing, is spinning wrenches.
Yeah, there's something fulfilling too. I mean, I love software, of course, like you, but you build something physical and you put it together. There's something there. There's something about that that's it's really cool.
It's a good mental exercise.
Yeah, and that family connection is always amazing. So, well, Randy, it's been a pleasure. If folks want to get in touch with you on the web, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, oneworldsync.com. You'll find me on that site sometimes, or well, always. But you might have to look a little bit. But otherwise, LinkedIn is probably the best way to just ping me on there and watch it pretty closely. So that's a good way to do it.
Perfect. Randy, thanks so much for spending time with us today.
100%, man. I always enjoy talking to you. So you can tell I enjoy talking about this stuff too. So happy to be here.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard, please visit our website at itsrapid.ai, where you can find out more about how we're helping leading brands like PepsiCo save thousands of hours a year when it comes to retail media and digital shelf content creation. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more great episodes of Beyond the Shelf. See you next time.